Sheila here, and today I'm going to show you a guide to building a Jade dock for patch 2.4 for Diablo 3. There's not too many changes to the Jade dock, but they added a few new pieces that really make it viable again, and it really hasn't been that viable since I think Season 3 was the last time I played Jade. So quickly I'm going to go over some of the new pieces. The first new thing they have added is this mojo, which is the Vile Hive, and it gives your Locust Swarm the effect of the Pestilence rune, which is the best rune. It's the one that basically jumps to all the enemies and also gives the increased damage to the Locust Swarm. The other new thing they added was these bracers, which is going to reduce your damage taken, and it's 6% for every stack of soul harvest that you have. And with the Sacred Harvester, you can have up to 10 stacks, which will give you a 60% damage reduction. So that is very important for running higher glyphs. The other new item that they've added is the Ring of Emptiness, and that is going to increase the damage to all enemies affected by both Haunt and Locust Swarm, which you should have applied pretty much 100% of the time to all of the enemies on the screen. So that's a really easy buff to keep up. The rest of the gearing is standard from old Jade. You have the 6-piece Jade set. I am using the hat and putting the Quetzalcoatl in my cube so that I don't have to use a royal ring. Now that you have the cube powers, that makes that a little bit easier to manage a full set. For the belt, I'm using the Haunting Girdle, which releases 1 extra spirit, which is kind of important because it gives you double the haunts out, and you can use the better rune of the haunt rather than the cold rune. For the amulet slot, I'm using a Hellfire, and any of the passes, of course, will work in this slot that you would normally have for Jade, and I'll go over those in just a second. For my other ring, I'm using the Unity with my follower. If you're playing group play or you're playing lower level, then you're not trying for the really high glyphs, you could also do a Poison SOJ. So for the cube powers, I have the Wormwood so that I don't need to have Wormwood on my bar. It's kind of normal from the old Jade set. You used to carry the Wormwood, but now you put it in your cube instead so that you can use the Sacred Harvester in the offhand. The Quetzalcoatl's in my armor slot, so I can go 6-piece. And then for my amulet spot, I like to have Mara's. Mostly because poison seems to deal the most damage to me, and a lot of the Rift Guardians, which Jade has a lot of trouble with Rift Guardians, more so really than anything else. And I'd say about 50% of the Rift Guardians have poisons attacks, so it really helps with a lot of the defense, and so it's my favorite choice for that slot. The legendary gems that I'm using is the Bane of the Stricken. Mostly because that Rift Guardian is really challenging for Jade. They're not very single target oriented, they're much more crowd control oriented. So that really just kind of helps you get that finishing done on the rifts. I also threw in the Esoteric for defense. Since most of my skill buffs are armor buffs, it made sense to buff up my resistances a little bit more. And then I'm using Bane of the Trapped, which is just going to increase my overall damage. For my skill sets, the main skill is Haunt, and I use the Poison Spirit Haunt, which adds a 20% more damage buff to all sources on each enemy it's applied to. And then Spirit Walk, of course, you need to get out of a sticky situation. Horrify, I use the rune that gives you additional armor, and with your passive, you can have that up all the time. So you will have an armor buff, plus it also makes really good crowd control because it immobilizes and fears your enemies. Tornado is also for crowd control, and it gives a 15% increased damage, and it's great to just group everything up with. Soul Harvest, of course, is key because that's how you get a big chunk of your damage done right away, and I use the rune that also increases your armor, and you will have that buff up all the time. And in fact, with both of these two buffs up, I have 72 million toughness. So it's very good. And then my other skill, I like to use Hex. This is the one that turns everything into pigs within a radius. It does a 30% extra damage. I can have it up almost all the time with the cooldown reduction. Plus, when they're pigs, they don't attack you. So it's another great crowd control. For my passives, the one on my amulet is Graven Justice, which you need to have on your skill bar because this is what allows you to have your skills up pretty much all the time when you need them. I have Spirit Vessel because I run hardcore. Creeping Death also for this build because it will help amplify the damage because it makes the overtime stuff last longer. Pierce the Veil, I don't really use a lot of mana for this build, and so it's just a straight up 20% damage increase. And then Confidence Ritual will also give me a straight up damage increase because I will always be close up to the enemies. A couple other things you could do instead, if you're running softcore and don't want to run a Spirit Vessel, you could put Bad Medicine in for defense. Also, if you're running hardcore and you're finding your survivability lacking, you could change out Confidence Ritual for Bad Medicine. Another variation I sometimes run is for T10, you don't quite need as much damage as you need for higher glyphs, so sometimes I switch out Confidence Ritual for Fierce Loyalty, and then I switch Piranado out for the dogs, and it gives you an increased movement speed, and so you will take a damage reduction, but then you will run faster, which can be nice for running through those T10 glyphs really quickly or bounties really quickly. there you have the build guide and a little bit of demonstration. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and please subscribe to my channel and follow me on Twitter so you can get all my latest updates, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.